Hello there. Birds' nests and the book of the prophet Hosea. How do those things go together? Well, we'll find out about that in a minute or two. But as we begin looking through the first of these minor prophets, let's put them into context. You'll remember that the minor prophets together are the fourth of the latter prophets. So, along with Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, together the minor prophets are part of the latter prophets. Hosea is the first, and we go down all the way to Malachi. It's perhaps helpful to understand them in three separate chunks. So the first six, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, and Micah, are all about judgment. Three of them are set in the 8th century, so early on, they're warnings. Stop this or stuff will happen. You can't go on living like this without consequences. The next three, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah, are all about punishment. They're based in the 7th century as things are hotting up and as Israel has been overcome and Judah looks like it's going to be destroyed by the Babylonians. There's clear pronouncement of punishment. The people have failed to listen to the prophets, to that warning of judgment, and now punishment is being declared. But things are more positive in the last three, in Haggai, in Zechariah, and in Malachi. Those are books about restoration, and obviously they come much later in the 6th or 5th century, after the people have been deported into exile. It's the promise of a new future. So think of the 12 in those three sections. The first six as all about judgment. The next three, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah, about punishment. And then the final three, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, as about restoration. We're back to Hosea and birds' nests. I haven't found this recently. I found it a couple of years ago in the hedges just over there. I think it's a dunnoc's nest. It might be a bit too big for that. But dunnocks are notoriously promiscuous. And that's the best link I could think of when it comes to talking about Hosea. A bit tricky to find an illustration for the book of Hosea, so promiscuous birds' nests I thought might just fill the gap. Because Hosea is the story of a prophet who was called by God to marry a prostitute, to demonstrate faithfulness in the midst of unfaithfulness. And the book is, if you like, 14 chapters exploring the depths of Israel's faithlessness and God's faithfulness. Time and time again, where Israel is unfaithful, God is faithful. Chapters 1 to 3 set the scene, and you can really just read those as a brief overview of the book if you like. Chapters 4 to 14 are then just a series of lawsuits underscoring the point. But in the midst of this ugliness, of the consequences of faithlessness, there is amazing beauty as God remains faithful to his people. Chapter 6 talks about how the people return. Come, let us reason together. Let us return to the Lord. There's some beautiful words there of repentance. God has torn us and he will heal us. He has struck us down, but he will bind us up. After 2 days, he will revive us. And on the third day, will raise us up. Those words are going to be significant in a few days' time as we move into the New Testament, aren't they? But chapter 2, in verses 14 onwards, after all of Israel's unfaithfulness has been vividly pictured by Hosea's unfaithful wife, God talks about how he's going to woo his people again. Not discard, not throw away, but woo. And in the midst of the Old Testament, with all of the perhaps our assumptions and understandings of what God is like in the Old Testament, it's a wonderful image, even for us, as to how we respond to the sin in ourselves and around us. Of course, God takes it seriously, but his response is to woo us back to restoration and to faithfulness, dealing with the reality of who we are with all of its dirtiness and ugliness, the inside stuff as well as the outside stuff, and yet wooing us in order to cleanse and to restore us. I don't think there's much hope for reforming Dunnock's behaviour. In fact, a few of them just flew in to illustrate the point. But there is huge hope about God's ability not just to cleanse us, but also through the power of his Spirit to renew us and to transform us, to change us from from faithless people to being people who can imitate and mirror his faithfulness. So read Hosea. Thank the Lord perhaps that you didn't have his calling, but marvel at God's faithfulness in the midst of his people's faithlessness. The book of Hosea, worth a read.